President Donald Trump is accusing Canada of financially retaliating against the U.S., and so he's vowed that starting on August 1st, he will impose a 35% tariff on all Canadian goods going.
Very visible and visceral reaction from markets to U.S. policies, but it's very interesting to see from the consumer side what impact it's having. And these little acts of activism from consumers who have decided to turn their back on certain U.S. products.
On a sweltering August morning, former President Donald Trump stunned North America by announcing a sweeping 35% tariff on all Canadian imports. The move, meant to protect American jobs and punish so-called unfair trade, was delivered with trademark bravado. But in Canada, the reaction was not fear, it was anger and a sense of betrayal. The tariff was a blunt instrument, hitting everything from lumber to maple syrup, and felt like a razor blade across a century-old partnership. News of the tariff dominated Canadian media, with analysts struggling to grasp the scale of disruption. On the streets, it was clear this wasn't just a trade dispute, it was personal. Political leaders condemned the move, but the real response came from ordinary Canadians. The tariff, intended to pressure the government, instead galvanized the public. A wave of economic nationalism swept the country, awakening a dormant pride. Canadians began to ask, why keep buying American when we're treated as adversaries? The answer was a call for personal action, not government retaliation. The stage was set for a rebellion waged $1 at a time. The Toronto Stock Exchange wobbled, the Canadian dollar dipped, but something deeper was happening. Conversations erupted online and in coffee shops. Should we keep supporting American brands? The tariff was the spark. The fire would be fueled by millions of consumer choices. This was no longer about diplomats or trade lawyers. It was about ordinary people taking a stand. The economic battle lines were drawn, not in boardrooms, but in shopping carts. The movement began not with a speech, but a hashtag #BuyCanadian. Within hours, it trended across social media, uniting Canadians in a digital call to arms. People shared lists of Canadian-made alternatives, posting photos of grocery carts filled with local goods. This was a spontaneous grassroots uprising, no leaders, just millions acting together. Every shopping trip became a political act, every purchase a statement. Facebook groups sprang up, neighbors swapped tips on local products, and Canadians discovered the quality of their own brands. The boycott was polite, resolute, and devastatingly effective. No protests, no flag burning, just a quiet refusal to support an economic relationship that now felt one-sided. The movement's strength was its simplicity. Anyone could join. Every dollar spent was a vote. As days turned to weeks, the impact grew. American brands saw sales plummet, while Canadian businesses thrived. The boycott was more than a protest. It was a re-education in domestic commerce. It fostered community, pride, and a sense of shared purpose. The message to the U.S. was clear. Respect is a two-way street. The silent rebellion was uniquely Canadian, firm, united, and impossible to ignore. The economic shockwave was just beginning. The first casualties were iconic American brands. Jif peanut butter, once a pantry staple, saw sales collapse as Canadians reached for homegrown alternatives. Grocery stores displayed untouched American products, while Canadian brands flew off the shelves. The beverage aisle told the same story. American beers and spirits became toxic, replaced by Molson, Labatt, and local craft brews. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario reported American spirit sales down over 60%. Harley-Davidson, a symbol of American freedom, faced plummeting sales as its image clashed with Canadian patriotism. Dealerships sat empty, buyers looked elsewhere. Online, Canadians scrutinized where products shipped from, avoiding U.S. warehouses and seeking Canadian retailers. Amazon orders from the U.S. to Canada dropped sharply. The boycott forced a new supply chain awareness. Consumers checked labels, tracked ownership, and made conscious choices. Millions of small decisions added up to a massive economic shift. American exporters felt the pain, but the message was unmistakable. Canada was decoupling its consumption from the U.S. The boycott was no passing trend. It was a powerful, sustained movement. The shelves told the story. Canada was buying Canadian and the world was watching. The economic fallout for American brands was only beginning. The U.S.-Canada border, once a symbol of seamless trade, became a choke point overnight. Northbound trucks carrying American goods found themselves idle, border crossings eerily quiet. American trucking companies and warehouses faced chaos. Inventory piled up, jobs vanished. Border towns in the U.S. suffered first empty parking lots, shuttered stores, and layoffs rippled through communities. Canadian border towns adapted, shifting focus to domestic shipping as demand for Canadian goods soared. The Trans-Canada Highway buzzed with activity, while north-south routes slowed to a crawl. The boycott reshaped the geography of commerce, redirecting billions in trade. The human cost in American border states was immense. Workers and business owners became collateral damage in a trade war they never wanted. The tariff, meant to punish Canada, hit American communities hardest. The supply chain seized up, and the pain was immediate. For the first time in generations, the border felt like a barrier, not a bridge. The economic ties that once bound the two nations were unraveling. The consequences were felt on both sides, but the shock was greatest where dependence ran deepest. American corporations scrambled to win back Canadian consumers with discounts and promotions, but the boycott wasn't about price, it was about principle. Attempts to rebrand or disguise American products as Canadian backfired, fueling distrust. Canadians, empowered by social media, exposed corporate tactics and doubled down on the boycott. Meanwhile, Canadian businesses experienced an unprecedented boom. Small and medium-sized companies, once overshadowed by U.S. giants, now thrived. Local bakeries, breweries, and manufacturers saw surging demand. Made in Canada became the most powerful marketing tool in the country. Larger Canadian corporations expanded, hiring more workers and investing in growth. The boycott acted as a consumer-driven stimulus, shifting billions into the domestic economy. Jobs were created, entrepreneurship flourished, and national pride soared. The tariff, meant to cripple Canada, unleashed its economic potential. A new era of self-sufficiency and confidence was born. The boycott did more than shift spending, it reshaped Canadian identity. The tariff was a wake-up call, sparking a surge in national pride and unity. Canadians saw themselves not as America's little brother, but as a sovereign nation with its own destiny. The government responded, launching initiatives to support homegrown industries and amplify the Buy Canadian message. Economic self-reliance became policy, not just sentiment. The movement bridged regional divides, uniting Canadians from coast to coast. Media celebrated Canadian innovators and entrepreneurs, shifting the narrative from grievance to pride. The power of collective action became clear. Change started in shopping carts, not Parliament. Canadians realized their daily choices could shape the nation's future. This new sense of agency became a permanent part of the national psyche. The crisis forged a stronger, more cohesive Canadian identity. Economic sovereignty was no longer taken for granted, it was actively defended. As Canada thrived, the pain spread across the U.S. Governors from border states pleaded with Washington, describing shuttered factories and lost jobs. Lobbyists flooded Capitol Hill, armed with data on lost sales and broken supply chains. The media narrative shifted from boldness to blunder, highlighting the boycott's devastating impact. American workers and business owners voiced their frustration, feeling betrayed by their own government. The White House, once dismissive, now faced mounting pressure to reverse course. The tariff, intended to force Canada's hand, was hurting Americans most. The administration scrambled for an exit, learning that punishing a close partner can backfire spectacularly. The lesson was clear: in a global economy, economic warfare cuts both ways. The 2025 U.S.-Canada trade dispute became a case study in the power of collective consumer action. The Canadian boycott showed that millions of coordinated shoppers could wield more influence than any government decree. Trust between nations, built over decades, was shattered in an instant by a single policy. American brands learned that reputation and respect are priceless and fragile. Protectionist policies have unpredictable, far-reaching consequences. The architects of the tariff underestimated Canadian resolve and the power of social media. The real strength of a nation lies in the collective will of its people, not just its leaders. The boycott was a democratic, decentralized response to centralized power. In the end, it proved that in the 21st century, consumers can be the most powerful force in global economics. The quiet repeal of the tariff did not restore the old order. Canada, now more self-reliant, diversified its trade and no longer took the U.S. partnership for granted. American brands faced a long road to regain trust. Made in Canada became a badge of pride. The world took note. Consumer movements could reshape international relations. The crisis marked a turning point. Consumer choice became a political force. North American trade was redefined, built on mutual respect, not assumption. The seamless integration of the past was gone, replaced by a more resilient partnership. The silent boycott that began with a hashtag rewrote the rules of trade for